we're focusing on three key roles that are part of that financial reporting cycle, and sort of who is responsible for what. So before we look at these three roles, I want you to know and be aware, as you no doubt are, that in addition to these three roles, there's also senior management, or the executive director or CEO of the organization also has a critical role to play in finances and financial reporting. And this is kind of difficult sometimes because there isn't, even though I've got a lovely chart with three columns, it's not that clear because every organization has slightly different roles and responsibilities. They may have a little different governance structure. A board may be very strictly a policy governing board versus more of a management hands-on board. And so what your governance structure is like will have some effect on what these roles, but so these are just very broad oversight or overview of what the roles are. So the board has oversight responsibilities. As the board of a nonprofit or a charity created, registered, incorporated in Canada, the board has fiduciary duties. The board is like a trustee because they're looking after somebody else's resources, whether those are donations that came from others, grants, or so on. The board is not dealing with their own money. They're dealing with the funds given by the donors and the contributors, and have a stewardship responsibility. So boards, I found, sometimes get more excited about dealing with programming and about achieving goals and so on, and they don't want to deal necessarily. It's no fun dealing with the finances, and we'll let the treasurer look after that. The board cannot delegate away its ultimate financial fiduciary responsibility. And so that is critical to oversee, maybe not do, obviously the board isn't doing the financial work themselves, but to know that somebody is getting it done. The board has the responsibility in planning ahead and setting priorities and direction for the organization, and that has a huge impact on where you choose to spend your money. Boards also have responsibility in risk assessment, and again, making sure that the people that are doing the work, whether that's the executive director and his or her employees or other volunteers, are mitigating risk to the extent that it's possible. And then all three parties have a responsibility in monitoring, but at different levels. So the treasurer role, I find, is defined very differently from one organization to the next. But in most cases, the treasurer is appointed by the board, often is a board member, or usually is a board member, not always, and basically acts as a liaison between the board itself or the finance committee and the staff that are in the financial area. And so they provide expertise both to the board to help them interpret financial matters, but also provide some advice perhaps to the CEO who may not be a financial expert. So the treasurer very often has a responsibility in both directions to advise and consult with both the board and with staff. The treasurer also often is the main liaison between the board and the external auditor, if your organization has an external auditor, and so has some responsibility there around year end to make sure that the auditor gets the information that they need and that the board gets the information that the auditor needs the board to get. And then finally, the organization will have somebody who actually does the accounting. And that might be a small organization, may have a part-time bookkeeper or a freelance bookkeeper, all the way up to a very large organization will have a controller reporting to a CFO. But in this context, I'm looking at the hands-on people that are recording the transactions. And so they would normally report to the senior staff officer, whether that's a general manager, executive director, or whatever that person's title is. And they would provide financial information to their boss, the executive director, to help them make good financial decisions. Other times they would also be sourced as the staff support for the treasurer or staff support for the finance committee. And again, that structure varies very, very much from one organization to the next. When the audit gets done at year end, the bookkeeper or the accountant or the controller, whoever that top level person is in the accounting group, would be the main liaison with the actual staff on the audit team of the company that's doing your external audit. So very different roles and responsibilities, and again, varies a lot from one organization to the next. But here's a general, when I'm talking about board, treasurer, or accountant, these are the three roles I'm referring to.